Hi there. Welcome to the new weekly Ozone radio show coming to you from sunny Bermuda. The show features items of general interest, including health, finances, lifestyle, with a dash of common sense and humor. Your hosts are Robin Trimmingham and Bill Story of the Olderhood Group. We hope you enjoy the show. So let's do this.
Welcome to the Ozone Weekly Radio Show. I'm Robin.
Hi, and I'm Bill.
And today we're talking about nutrition. So, Bill, I know you have a tremendous amount to say on this subject. So I'm just going to launch us right in here. Why is it as adults that we don't just cooperate and eat our veggies?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a very simple but tremendously good question. I mean, why don't we? I probably, going back a few years, I might have been guilty of that myself. I really wasn't into vegetables, etc. But no, I tell you what happened. I was on a Zoom chat a couple of days ago with a very good friend of mine who's a fellow Scot, so that helps, who lives in Mexico. And we just chat about a whole bunch of different things. And for some reason, he's a few years older than me. And for some reason, we got on to talk about diet and, what do you eat? And I'm not quite sure why, but we did. And he said that he now has somebody that kind of makes most of his meals. And of course, these folks are Mexican. And, he says, I'm typically eating what you would call Mexican food. He said, but it's still the same. It's meat, it's chicken, etc., some pasta. And he said, and veggies. And I said, oh, really? Is that a problem for you? He said, yeah. He said, I think it is a problem, or has been. He said, I don't think it's a problem nowadays. He said, because, the food comes in front of me and, I'm hungry. So he said, I eat it. I said, so we're talking about what, green beans and stuff like that. He said, yeah. He said, that's right. So that led us on to talking about, why don't we like, eating, healthy or nutrition. And we both agreed that the whole question of nutrition, it's not a case of saying we don't believe the health impact. We do. We firmly believe that. And I think most people firmly believe that if you eat well and if you do eat your veggies, etc., then from a health perspective, you're doing okay. You're doing the things that you should be doing. But what holds us back from not eating properly? And I think leaving aside the health issue, there are any number of reasons why, for some reason, we don't. Things like junk food seems to be a convenience food. It's just easier to go get a hamburger and French fries as you're driving home from work. So I think, things like time is involved in that. I don't have the time to cook, better meals. But, it's one of those things. It's a very personal thing.
Okay, I agree with quite a bit of what you're saying, but I actually think it goes further than that. If we're going to go down the path that says that you do have enough financial resources to feed yourself adequately, because, if you don't, bless your heart, that's a completely different problem. But we're talking about the millions of people in the world who actually do have enough money to feed themselves, but they're not making healthy choices. And I was getting ready for our conversation today, and I kept asking myself, why is that? And really, the answer that was coming up inside me wasn't very comfortable, because the answer that was coming up inside me is, well, is it that we just don't care enough whether or not we remain healthy? And that's a really uncomfortable question for a lot of people, because if you are ever going to admit to yourself that you're not eating as healthy as you can because you don't care, then the scarier question becomes, why don't you care enough to eat healthy and maintain your life?
I don't think it's a case of caring. I think we all care about our health, but I think it's got a lot to do with knowledge. I think that when we go, for example, when we go to the supermarket, when we go to the grocery store, we're walking around, we're looking for things to eat. Now, most people will go with a shopping list. So they go, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. That's okay. Everything's fine with that. However, because of, call it branding, maybe these days, you see things on the shelf that you're not particularly needing, but it looks nice. It's got a tremendous photograph on the front page. It looks really great. Wow, that would be fantastic. Part of that problem, of course, is that when you take it home, or at least in my case, I take it home, if I take it home, but it never sort of comes out the way that it looks on the cover of the package. But I mean, nowadays I spend a lot of time looking at the label. I think you're looking for things like calories. You're looking at things like, sugar, carbohydrates, etc. Sodium's another big thing. I don't think people look at labels that much. And frankly, they're maybe not to blame, because sometimes you look at these labels and you have no idea what they're trying to tell you. If there was consistency across the food world where we could say, okay, that means that, and this means the same thing, you would understand it. But I think you look at some of these labels, and for us older folks, sometimes you look at the label and you can't read it. Mm-hmm. It's so small, and it's got different words. And you say, so I think knowledge is a big part of that.
I think you made about 5 different points all rolled into one there. So let's try and break this down a little bit. I agree with you that knowledge is important and knowledge is involved in this conversation, but I am going to push back a little bit on the notion that in this day and age, people just don't know what's healthy. Because at least on what I'm going to call the entry level, with all of the social media, all of the information on television, on the internet, I think if you have internet access, at least basically what they recommend that a person eat at any age or stage of their life. I think it's pretty hard to say that you really don't know these things in this age and time. However, the step 2 of this is, you're absolutely right. Packaging can be incredibly misleading. And I'm actually very encouraged to hear that you're a label reader. I think everybody should be reading the labeling on the back of packages, but it's very, very difficult because these things aren't standardized internationally. How they measure the size of a serving in the UK, for example, is completely different from how they measure the size of a serving in North America. Well, why is that important? Because if your serving sizes are different, you look at the percentage of fat or sugar or carbohydrates in the serving, and it doesn't seem like it's too much, but it's completely different measurements in another part of the world. And the other thing is, what they are labeling to be one serving on the back of the package, is that realistic with regard to how much you're going to eat before you feel like you've had enough, before you feel like you're full? Because in most cases, what they will call one serving isn't on any level satisfying from a hunger perspective inside an adult person. So I think this is a very, very tricky business. And the other thing is that some foods that are labeled and marketed as healthy may not be healthy for people at all ages and phases of their life. And this is where it gets really important to start doing your own research. I'm going to talk about just one example that fooled me completely for the longest time. Oatmeal. It's a grain. We were all raised to believe that unprocessed grain in its pretty much natural state that didn't have sugar added would be a good thing. But apparently, oatmeal is absolutely loaded with carbohydrates, and in an older person particularly, it translates into a carbohydrate is interpreted pretty much the same as sugar in your body. And if you have a big old bowl of oatmeal in the morning, you think you've done really well for yourself. 10 a.m., you're absolutely starving and you're on a sugar high and you have no idea why that is.
I think you've just thrown a curveball back at me, because you've raised, half a dozen really good points there. And I think I would have a response to every one of them. You talked about the internet. I think you're absolutely right. The internet's got all sorts of information. It's not a case of, do you know where to get the information? That's not the problem. The problem is, do you go and find the information? I mean, if you ain't going to go and find it, then you're just going to have, or you're going to lack the knowledge about that kind of a thing. I'd also say that I think particularly for us older folks, I'll be honest. I mean, when I was younger, I never looked at labels at all. But now, as I say, for a variety of reasons, I do, because I think as we get older, things start to change. You have to, think a little bit more about that nutritional, value. And I would respond to your last point about the serving thing. You can pick up a package that will tell you how many calories or carbs, whatever it may be, is in the package. And then you pick up another package and it'll tell you what's in a serving size. And you're right, a serving size for one person is absolutely different from the serving size, for another person, typically. So that's where, I was going to say the days of going to the grocery store and being back out in 10 minutes, have gone. In some respects, they have gone. I mean, I can spend half an hour just wandering around about because I'm looking at all the packages. I don't make the mistake these days of really paying much attention to the photograph in the front, because, to be honest, I'll the first thing I'll do is I'll take it out, the freezer or whatever it may be, and the first thing I'll do is I'll look at the back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually very glad to hear that. I think there is something very important we have to point out to everybody who's watching or listening to this conversation. First of all, quite obviously, Bill and I are not qualified medical professionals. We are not nutritionists. So the start of any conversation that you're going to have regarding how do you improve how you're eating or what you're eating really needs to take place with the healthcare professional of your choosing. And you need to talk about what is appropriate for optimum nutrition for you at your age and phase of life and your current level of activity, because all of those things can seriously impact how your body is processing the food that you eat, regardless of what that food might be. And once you have that basic information in hand, then you can start to really research, what foods are going to provide you with the optimum nutrition in what combination.
Yeah, but I think there's also another little mea culpa point here, is that sometimes, I'll go there and I'll pick up some, like Brussels sprouts, for example, which I kind of like Brussels sprouts, especially if you're out at a restaurant. If they're on the menu, I'll go, yeah, I'll have some of those. But at home, I've asked several people, you included actually, if I recall, how do I cook these things? Now, that may just be, perhaps it's a lack of knowledge, but it's more like laziness. You're just lazy about the whole thing. I don't know how to cook it. So I think a lot of people just don't know how to cook good nutritional food. I don't think that's a cop-out. I think that's a fact. I think a lot of people just don't know. So therefore, if they don't know, they don't do.
Okay, that's an excellent point, because you're absolutely right. Particularly older people who didn't grow up in a house where they had to do their own cooking might very well be quite inexperienced in the kitchen. There's a really simple remedy for that. Any single thing in the world that you would like to know how to cook, you can find a YouTube where they're going to break it down into very small steps and actually show you exactly what to do and how to do it. But there's a caveat, and your Brussels sprouts is the perfect example. If you see somebody who is cooking the vegetable, in this case, the Brussels sprouts, in a very plain manner, and maybe just putting a tiny little bit of seasoning or butter after the fact. That's all well and good. If you see somebody cooking Brussels sprouts and they're drowning them in maple syrup or some kind of very thick sauce, you have to be very, very careful, because yes, you might be getting the Brussels sprout, but then you're also getting a whole pile of extra sugar and carbohydrates on top of it. And you pretty much defeated the purpose of eating the Brussels sprout in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. So I think probably what we're saying here is that nutrition isn't new at all. It's some old kinds of things that our granny used to do, because she never had a microwave, or she never really probably went to the supermarket and stuff like that. She certainly probably never looked at labels. So maybe we should recall this, not nutrition, but let's just call it old-trition. Maybe that's the best way to get out of this one.
Well, okay, old timer, you can call it old-trition. I like the nutrition topic. I think we're going to talk about this one more than once this year. But you know what you're making me think? Maybe the best way forward with all of this is to say that you're going to learn and incorporate one new thing a week to improve the quality of the nutrition and your understanding of this whole subject.
All right. Can I get back to you on that?
Yeah, we're going to be quizzing you to see what you've learned next. Thank you for joining us today. You've been watching the Ozone Weekly Radio Show. Join us again soon.
Bye.